the separateness that we're feeling right now. We're here in separateness on purpose. It's so
Yes, I agree.
we went through that veil of forgetting, or we
Yes.
never put up with the crap we put up with. It's like there's no way that we'll come down. We may volunteer on the other side to come and be a starving child or a beaten wife or something, because and that has 10 different trails I could go down. We choose those circumstances for a reason. But if we didn't forget how magnificent we are on the other side and who we are, there's no way. It'd be like, take me home, I'm hungry. This is baloney. So to make this experience real, we had to forget how we are one.
My guest today is Claudia Edge, who had a near death experience giving birth. And it's a really incredible story. And maybe even more incredible are all of the gifts that she has developed since she's had her near death experience 40 years ago. So, Claudia, welcome and thank you for joining
Hi.
us.
Thank you. I appreciate your having me. I always appreciate a platform to share, because that's what I'm told that I'm supposed to do. So,
Oh, well, good. Well, we're both fulfilling our purpose then, because that's what I'm
yeah,
told I'm supposed to do, give
yeah.
people the platform for this.
I love it.
Well, great. Well, why don't we start with your life before you
Okay.
had this happen when you were in your 30s?
Okay. I think I always had a propensity to be more open. I was always, having dreams that when I'd ask my friends, what'd you dream last night? And they'd be like, I don't know. I don't remember. And it's like, well, I just always felt like they were important. And I grew up in a family. My mother had 9 brothers and sisters, and she was one of the youngest, second to the end. And so I ended up going to a lot of funerals in my young
Mm.
years, brothers and sisters, 9 of them on down the road. And so even as a young child, I would, you know, they were open caskets. That's, our family's deal. And I just knew that there was just so much more, and I would question. And I also found myself talking to the relatives, especially the ones that were really distraught and crying. And, I'm a little kid, I'm, 6, 7, 8, whatever years old, and going, it's okay. They're in heaven, or they could be in this room. It's like, this is just their, I mean, I'm saying these things as a little kid. And my grandmother heard me and she's like, where are you getting this stuff? And I was like, well, I don't know. Am I wrong? And she says, well, I don't think you are, but it's kind of weird, that you have such a propensity, for these things at such a young age. But I had a lot of nightmares and things like that. And so I don't know. I lost my dad when I was 16. I was a daddy's girl, and I just thought he was just the most wonderful person ever. And when I lost him, I was lost. I was looking for him. I wanted to know exactly where he was. What was he doing? Did he miss me too? It's like, what do you, well, okay, he's in heaven. Well, what is he doing? And my religious background, he was building some castle for the whole family or something, for us to all go and be together. And I would always question. I'd be like, well, that's good for our family, but like, my dad has a family and sisters and everything. It has to be a pretty big house to hold all of us, and it was just, I've always questioned. And so when he passed, and I'm looking for those answers, I was grabbing first at religious texts and what not, because at least in my religion, there wasn't a belief in the afterlife. So I wasn't beyond what I was looking for, connected to that religion. But I wanted more. And he died in 1969, and a number of years later, here come books, one of them from Dr. Raymond Moody. And it was such an experience to read from the other, how do I put this, a non-religious type. And I'm not down on religion. It holds a very important place for people and community and an opportunity for service. So please don't take it raw. I'm not disparaging any type of connection to God here. We all find our connection and our comfort and whatnot. So that's not where I'm going from this, but I wanted more when questions seemed unanswered through it. I wanted more. So I call myself a seeker. I always have been. And I wanted to know this information from my father. And so I checked out all of these books. And for your listeners out there, you're here because you're a seeker too. There's questions. I don't have all the answers. Lori doesn't have all the answers. But when we get together and we start piecing what we know, we converse, we talk about, we question, it opens, there's that opening that just, it gets wider, it gets bigger, it lets more in. But as you're letting more in, you've got to let some things go. And that's really scary. And so what I found is I have an old treadle sewing machine from my grandmother. After she passed, it was like, I want grandma's treadle. And it's a beautiful piece of furniture with dovetail drawers, little tiny drawers that hold the threads and the little scissors and all that. And she was deeply religious. And I thought, I trusted my grandma, loved my grandma. I'm going to put what needs to come out so that I can let some of this new information in. And I'm going to safely put it in that little drawer in her treadle sewing machine. I don't want to throw it away. It's part of my foundation. It's what I grew up with, my Sunday school stories, all the things that are comforting and make me feel good. They're safely in that drawer. And if I ever
Claudia,
need
that's a
them,
brilliant idea
oh,
because there is a process that is kind of
mm-hmm,
physical with letting things go. We have this emotional process, but the
mm-hmm,
physical process of actually doing that really would release it mentally too a little bit more. I
mm-hmm,
love that
mm-hmm.
idea. I've never heard anybody
You.
say that before.
Oh, that's awesome.
That is
It
awesome.
it's helped me. It's because it's not just out there floating into nothingness.
Yes.
It's right where I left it. I haven't needed to go back to it, but I know that it's there if I need it. And so as I'm reading these wonderful books, and then years later, Dr. Michael Newton's book,
Oh my gosh, I
Journey of
love
Souls.
him.
Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
I love his books. If he were still alive, I would want to interview him and have him on my show.
Yeah,
He was
yeah,
so deep. I learned
yeah.
so much from him.
Well, and he didn't start out that way. We find ourselves going, we just said it earlier, how do you unknow something? He stumbled upon um, the in between of the soul, in between lives. And you can't unknow these things once they're there. It's like it made absolutely perfect sense. So um, I've written 3 books. I'm just finishing my 4th. But I'll tell your readers out there, if you have not read Journey of Souls, that's the one to go get. It's important to me. I love my books. It's my story about, and I'm sure you'll put links and everything. And I'd love for you to get my books, but get that one first. That's how genuine
I
I
have it. Hold on.
okay.
Like this is how accessible it was.
Yeah, yeah. Yes.
Seriously, like you said it, and I immediately looked and saw it on my shelf like that. It was
Yeah.
a really pivotal book for me as well.
It's one of those aha moment books that you can read about a page and a half if you can get through it without setting it down and going, it puts a lot into perspective and
Yeah.
into its place. So I highly recommend. A lot of people don't read anymore. I'm not even sure if this one is in audio, but it's worth it.
Yeah,
So,
I love that. Well, all right. Well, then do you want to talk about what happened with your near-death experience?
sure, sure. It was 40 years ago for me last week. My
Wow.
my youngest
I'm going
daughter,
to guess your daughter just turned 40.
she just turned 40. She was on a cruise ship having a good time. So all is well. But yeah.
Her daughter does not die in this story. Say
Well,
what
and
you're
she's
going to
like, that's got to be hard to have your birth tied into your mother dying and all of this
get.
stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But we were in a dire situation. I also wanted to mention your gut feeling, your intuition, how important that is, because neither one of us would be here if I hadn't thought, I'm fine. I don't feel, how do I put this? I didn't feel quite well, but I didn't hurt or anything like that. And it just kept going, in my ear. It's like, go to the hospital, go get checked out. And I finally followed that. And it wasn't 10 minutes later that I just started to bleed. It was, you know, letting your audience know it can get very graphic. But what happened, we found out later, was my placenta, that organ that is between the mother and the baby, exploded. It didn't rip or tear from, the uterus or anything. I know a lot of medical lingo here, but it exploded like a grenade inside of me. And my baby drowned. She was drowning in my blood. And they had to get to her really fast. And I'm not even in an operating or a labor room. I'm in the exam, the first stop examination room. I had barely pulled a gown on when this started. So there was like The Shining, like it was just running down the hallway kind of blood. And I was bleeding out. And by the time that they found somebody that was immediately at the hospital, because my doctor had been called and said she's got a long way off or whatever, but she's had children before, so roll over, go to sleep, we'll call you later. So they had to find an intern that was not even a specialist in delivering a baby. It was that dire. And he walked in and took a look at the scene in the room and said, this woman's got 2 minutes of blood left to live. And they rolled in a scalpel cart, and I am no anesthesia, no warm blanket, no operating light theater, no anything, not even an aspirin. They held my arms and legs down. As I said, I gave them permission to save my baby. And it was pretty awful. It was pretty painful. There aren't words to express that kind of human pain and live through it. And sorry, I lose my place because when I go back there, it was hard to live through. And as a mother, you're concerned about your child. And when they pulled her lifeless body from me, I checked out. I mean, I'm like, I'm dying. I have been told I'm dying. It's one thing when you go, I'm going to ride on the front seat of the roller coaster, but I might die. Might die is not the same as going, you've got 2 minutes of life left. And I'm trying to hold on to everything in the room, the sounds, what people were saying, what was happening to me, because I didn't know. So I was, laying on the gurney and peeking over, trying to see what they were doing to me. At the same time, I'm writhing back and forth as hands and instruments and everything are pulling out my intestines and cutting into my uterus. And, it was pretty gruesome. And I flipped back out of my body. It was too much to witness that little body. I didn't even know it was a little girl at the time. I just saw this little lifeless body, and it was like, I'm done. I'm so done. And the time when I was noticing everything, holding on to the last few moments of my life, I heard the song MASH playing. And in Utah in those years, we're talking 84, right after the news, they played MASH. And so here I am, I'm dying. I'm in the process of leaving my body. And I went, I'm dying, it's 10:35 at night. And the MASH theme is what I heard. And I pulled out of my body, and I just decided to go find the MASH theme. I was not instantly in this a wonderful realm of near-death experiences that so many others have. I was floating down the hospital halls, and I ended up in a gentleman's room that was watching MASH. And I noticed after a moment or two that he had no idea I was there. And I went, oh my goodness, I must be dead. And as soon as I thought that, I was in this place. And this is where it's very sacred to me because it's so personal and because it was so misunderstood. I ended up in a place of complete darkness, completely black. I could see nothing. I could only feel. I could only feel in this place that I knew was holding me, was cradling me. I knew that I was completely loved. I was cherished. I was adored. I knew it. I felt it. And it was perfect. It was a perfect conscious. The darkness was like a being of perfection. It was intelligent. And I could have stayed there forever in the darkness and just been satisfied to to be there. And so when they pulled me back, and it took quite a while to get enough blood in me to even really converse, but at one point, a couple of days later, there was a researcher. It was a teaching hospital. And I was asked, what did you see, hear, feel when you died? There wasn't a question that I had died. It was documented. And, um, I it takes a while from an experience like that to form words. And being so ill, I said, well, I was in this really cool darkness, or just something like that. And the researchers got her clipboard ready to write down this miraculous story of, and it wasn't a miraculous story to her. It was kind of like wah wah. It's like she was in darkness. And that, I know she didn't mean it to be a negative, but you read people, and a negativity flashed across her face. And I went, okay, I grew up in a pretty strict religion, and I did not want this beautiful sacred thing that was mine to be have an opinion about it. Well, you went to the darkness, you must be bad. It must have been a negative experience. And I'm going, there was nothing negative. And when you hear those things, you start, was it, could it be, could I have been so fooled, or whatever, that perfect love was a foolish, thing. It was false. It was like, no, it wasn't. But I just tucked it away, just like in my grandmother's treadle. It's like only it found a place within me. And I just kept it pushed down. It was just mine. And I didn't talk about it for 20 years. I did continue to read Dr. Moody's books and other books. And I continued to look for myself in somebody else's story. And you know what? We'll never find ourselves in somebody else's story. Our stories are our own,
Yes.
that
It's so funny, Claudia, you say that because I have watched, listened to, and read well over 1,000 of these stories, and they are as unique and individual as
mm,
our personalities. It's almost like they're the snowflake. There's no two that are the
exactly. They're
same.
so,
They are very unique to each person.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's why I love to do this, because I'll never run out of unique stories to share with my
mm,
audience.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
perfect.
I love that you shared that. Thank you so much. I cannot even imagine the horror of having to deliver a child and get a C-section with absolutely no
Mm,
anesthesia or anything. But the fact that you died and you left your body, it's interesting to me that you were drawn to that theme song from the show MASH, because the other part is that your husband was in another room filling out those insurance papers. You had
Mm-hmm.
only been gone from him for 5 minutes,
Yeah.
and this all happened. Did you happen to see him or visit him in the hospital before you left?
I I kind of hovered near him, but and his head was down. He had cards and stuff out. He was busy, and I just had this rush of, this is going to be really hard on my family, because I had four little ones at home besides him. And um that fleeting thought, but at the same time, it was like it was replaced by, it's all going to be okay. It just there wasn't a lingering of, and there wasn't a lingering above my body in this condition. It
Yeah,
was,
did you look at yourself from that
I looked at
perspective?
the gore of it.
You did see it.
I did, oh yeah, I did see it, and it
Did you
was,
recognize it was your body?
I knew, because I had just kind of been through it. I recognized that it was me, but I didn't feel a sadness or attachment to the body itself, because everything that made up me, Claudia, was okay. I still had my personality and, my jokester and whatever that made up me was just fine. So it wasn't like and I'd gone to the gym and dieted all through my pregnancy. So it was kind of like, oh, darn, all those wasted hours at the gym.
That's hilarious.
It was like, Claudia's fine, I'm free. And I also think that I was chasing that music because as I was dying and noticing everything, I thought about my heartbeat and how every beat of my heart was pushing blood out. And so I was trying to stay as calm as I could as I'm being held down and having parts ripped out of me. And the only thing I could move was my head. But I went, oh, just try and keep, I focused on my heart. And then when I heard that music, it was like it was something else to focus on. So I think my soul was really drawn to just follow that focus.
So did you move as a spirit through the hospital corridors? Did you go through walls or were you just
I
instantly
It
there?
wasn't, no, I must have gone through walls, because, and it wasn't like, oh, I'm coming up to a wall. It was like riding a bike, like it was so natural. I didn't think about it, because I was in the front part of the natal, part of the hospital. He was just in a chair in the waiting room next to it, the nurse's desk here, and so it was one wall, which I don't know, I was just following the music, and that's, whether it was notes or the sound, but I didn't feel like, oh my goodness, I just went through a wall kind of thing. And when I passed him, it was, there was a thought of, as I said before, of, this is going to be hard on my family, but it didn't register death. I think because I felt so okay. I was still so me, that it wasn't until in that hospital room, when he just absolutely didn't see, that I went in front of his face and did kind of one of these things,
Wow.
and he didn't flinch or anything. So I went, and I hadn't had that opportunity with my husband, because his head was down, writing, on the insurance form. So he had no idea I was there, because his head was down. And then here's this patient that didn't see me or hear me. And that's when it really clicked. Oh my goodness, you start adding these things. And throughout the hospital, I did go down corridor, and I noticed the heat. It was hotter up closer to the ceiling.
Oh,
And
that's interesting. You
yeah,
could feel, you could
I felt that.
resonate. Interesting. I've never heard anybody say that before.
And those the school clocks that were out in the hallway or whatever, they're attached at the wall and just kind of hang over. I remember going over that clock, and hospital, they try and keep it as clean as possible, but up on the very top of the clock was that sticky dusty part, I wouldn't say it was filthy or anything, but it was old. And, it's like the top of your cupboards in the kitchen where you can't quite get that gunk off. And I was like, oh, that's kind of disgusting above the clock. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, so you're in the void and you have this experience. So I'm curious. You've already been exposed to near-death experience studies and
Mhm.
stories through these books that you've read as a seeker.
Right.
And now you have this experience that doesn't match up. So one of the things I think is really interesting is that based on some people's thought process, they might think, well, yeah, you had a near death experience because you read all of these things, but you didn't have anything even close to what you had read about.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit more about that void because you said that you felt cradled and held in there.
Hmm.
Is the void an entity? Is it God? Is it all that is? Because you almost made it sound like it had human, like loving characteristic to it.
It,
And I know our human
yeah,
vocabulary is so
yeah,
limited to all of this.
right. To say, because everything is God, it's like to say that God was holding me. I'm sure that was part of it. The all knowingness of it, the intelligent, the love that was endless was definitely of God. But was I being actually held by God? I don't know. I honestly don't know. What I wanted to interject as you were speaking, asking this question, is also as I was laying there, taking in the last few moments of my life, there was a bit of excitement because I knew I was going to go see my dad. It had been 15 years since he died. And I thought, well, I'm going to get to see my dad today. In just a few minutes, I'll be with him. And so how do you say you're looking forward to that? It was like that was kind of a bright light in the middle of all of this because I had no doubts that I would. And then here I went to this void. And in fact, I'm going to not use that word. I'm going to scratch that one because it doesn't fit. I'm going to say I went into the vastness. It was it was everything and nothing all at the same time. And it was enormous. It was everything. It didn't have a beginning or an end. And when I could hear the hospital trying to pull me back, I just found myself wrapping and wanting to go deeper into it. I've had a lot of years to explore it. Was it the in between? Was I like in heaven? It's like, well, as an NDE, that you've heard so many accounts, it's like, can anyone actually say, this is where I was, to have heaven kind of given in a box with a nice bow and here presented, and this is what the garden looks like, and this is what, and I saw grandma, and I went to the river of life, and all of those things, they're all very different. And I think they are all attuned to what we need. And as many stories and people that I've met, because once I read a book or whatever, it's like, I've got to meet that author. I want to touch them because they've been to heaven, kind of thing. And they're a star in my eyes, right? They're a rock star, NDE rock star. But yeah, those accounts are all different. And sorry, kind of jumped off a ledge there, but it wasn't until as I was really exploring that I went, oh my goodness, I didn't see my dad. And I was kind of pissed off about it,
I'll bet.
and so in all the years of kind of trying to figure out what it was, I know that if I had seen him, I would have never been able to come back. I think I was held in a place of trying to heal the trauma of what I was so that I could come back. I think. And it wasn't until years later, as I was, trying to hold that experience down and not talk about it, and it just kind of kept bubbling back up, push it down. It's like it needed to be examined, and I was examining everybody else's experience and not my own. That it was about 20 years before I really delve into, a lot of those now newer books that weren't
Mhm.
available in the 70s and whatnot. So
I
my
remember Dr. Eben Alexander. He wrote his book
Mhm,
Proof of Heaven back in 2012. And he
mhm,
was definitely one of the earliest books that I read, other than Dr. Raymond Moody, who spoke of
right,
course, life after life. But I remember him having an experience in what he described as a void. His void was very, very different than yours.
that
He had
murky,
had, yeah,
yeah,
he had that belief system that we died and we became nothing. And that's what he experienced until he had that one thought, is this all there is? And then it opened up
and
into
then
a
it
heavenly
yeah,
realm.
it's
So
like
yours
giving the
sounds very
universe
different than mine.
permission to give you information.
Yeah.
Because we're here to live this life, it's like, but if you ask, and you're fervently asking, and your intent is real, then you get those things. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I
No.
love this story of Dr. Eben Alexander because I was at an IONS meeting, IONS being, the International Studies of Near-Death Experiences. And it was my first meeting. It was wonderful. It was huge, and the people were awesome. And God, I just hold that in the highest regard of what that did for me to attend that meeting. And it was about 3 months, no, probably about 4 or 5 months before his book came out. And he was the keynote speaker. And I ended up at a banquet luncheon where he was kind of kitty crossed from me. There were tables and tables of people, but I got to sit near him, and I heard him talking about his father and his expectations of his near-death experience. Well, if I died, wouldn't I have seen my father, whom I love, that's, an expectation. And he had already gone through, so much of this process where he said, if I'd have seen him, I would have not been able to come back. That just, that was something. And his talking so freely that way opened up the door for me, because I went, if he didn't see his dad and I didn't see my dad, it's like there's a reason for those things. There's a reason for what we see. And so he was a huge help before his book even came out.
That's really great. I love that you shared that because I want to say to everybody watching, if you're watching this, there's no accident that you're here, because it's amazing what these stories do open up in people. I've never shared this story before on my channel, but back when that book came out, I read it right away when it came out, and I was so touched by it, especially the end of it. I don't want to give it away for those of
Mhm,
people who are going to watch it. There's a really cool synchronicity that happened to him within his story that he
mhm,
didn't discover till after he came back. But my husband at the time was very agnostic about all of these spiritual things that I was studying. He really didn't believe much of anything. He kind of was in that mindset that Dr. Alexander was before, that, oh, you just die and you die and there's nothing. And I gave him that book to read, and he read it, and it completely opened him up and
wow,
changed him to believe that there was something more. And he is so much more open. He's completely different than he was before he read that book. And that's part of the reason that I do this, because I do want people to understand the power that they truly are. And sometimes we just need a little nudge, a little push, a little story that sends us down a rabbit hole to learn more and explore more and just open our hearts and our minds to the possibilities of what they are. And I think that's what these stories do.
well, and for your program and your interest, and because they've made waking up or woke or whatever such a bad term, and it's like people are becoming really interested, whatever the reason. And I won't even get to the woo-woos or anything like that, but there are more and more people that are paying attention to these type of stories, and there's just not enough. There's the wanting, and that you'll sit and binge story after story. So I honor what you're doing,
Oh, thank
to
you.
assist in that search, because there's so many seekers out there. And when you find someone genuine and real, and it's like follow, listen. And I do want to mention to the audience as well, I can throw out some wild sounding, so it's like, because I was taken to a place called Spirit School, and I've received all kinds of wonderful lessons in metaphor and parable and things that help me understand so that I can share them. But sometimes it's like, oh my goodness, that sounds so out there, and it's like, if it's too out there for you, just put it on the mind shelf, just kind of, you don't have to incorporate everything that we're saying here. But if it sounds interesting, you don't have to toss it, let it kind of see, hold it up to the light, and
I love
leave
that you
yourself
said that.
open.
Thank you for saying that. I have said that many, many times on my
Mm,
show. If you don't feel drawn to something, it doesn't resonate here, let it
mm,
go. You may come
yeah,
back to it later. You may never come back to it.
exactly.
Yeah, I think that that's great advice for people. Well, you actually mentioned something that lets me go in a different direction
Okay.
and ask you, because you have a very unique experience that you have called your Earth School,
Yeah.
your lessons. So you became very open um, spiritually after this experience. I can imagine that it must have changed you in a lot of different ways. So, do you want to share with everybody how you became different after something like this? Because now it's not like you think there might be something else, you know for sure through your experience.
Right. Well, I kept my experience pushed down for 20 years, but then it came a point where it's like, and through those 20 years, I just felt like, I was walking through the desert and I was looking at everything. I'm looking at astral projection, and I'm looking at clairvoyancy, and I'm looking at, just everything. And it was like I was given little gifts of a little bit of all kinds of things like that. And I would test it. I would try and contact the dead or whatnot. And it's like, what's my place in the world kind of thing. And so I looked for it. And so I had little experiences of a lot of different things. I have no forte. I don't into being all knowledgeable or anything like that. I share what I get. And the bestest way for that I receive is in dream. I trust my dreams. It's my space where I can freely think and travel with. And I got to share getting to know my guide, because he's been so important in this journey, right? He's as I learn, I get affirmations that's correct or whatnot. But I really, really had to invite him. And I used to drive a lot of miles, a lot of windshield time as an outside salesperson. I sold optical wear and that to doctors all over Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, Kansas. I was in the car all the time.
You've got to be kidding me. You
Uh,
sold eyeglass frames?
yeah,
I did that
yeah.
for 6 years,
Oh my goodness, that's awesome.
like
That's
really
awesome.
early in my career.
Yeah,
So you try and go get space in optical shops and they put your stuff in
exactly.
and then you
Check
take
the
back a bunch
board
of
and
your
what
stuff.
sold and all that stuff. Yeah,
Yeah. And that's an
that is,
unusual career path. So it's kind of
yeah.
funny that we both have it.
Yeah,
That's
I
great.
loved it. And I love driving. What I used to do is one of the things that I had a problem with in religion was talking that way, talking with these and thous and amens and all of those things. It just wasn't in my vernacular. And it felt like it was holding me from having a relationship with God by trying to use those terms. And so I actually have written some stories about my spiritual guide is, he's in the passenger seat of my car. I can't see him, but I talk to him and I'd be like, oh man, did you see that car almost hit us, or, whatever. And just made him my friend. And I just so believed that he was there. I just knew he was, though I'd never heard anything from him, but he started to appear in my dreams.
What did
And
he look like?
oh my goodness, that's the thing, is eh, he's hilarious for one thing. And I've had that backed up by so many different people that are going, man, your guide is hilarious. He doesn't let me see him. He shows up in costume, which is how I know it's him, because he's so like the very first one that I noticed, he was dressed up like a fairy, like in a pink tutu and the little glitter top, with a hairy back and a cigar in his mouth. And he's flitting around in my regular dream. I don't remember the dream, but I'm like, what is that? And he held up a billboard, and he was like, come with me. Or he would, he communicated with me through a card that I could read. And he would say things like, wake up, or, listen to this, or remember this, or something. So he would show up like the Texaco man in the pleated khaki, and he'd come and he'd do this. So he took on a persona. His face was never his face. He was always in a costume. And I went, oh my goodness, I just saw my guide. And sometimes when I miss him, I'm just like, I haven't seen you for a while in my dreams. And one day he was like the fiddler on the roof, and he just jumped off the roof and did the dance, just in front of me, just to say, and then just wave and say hi and be gone. But that relationship took a long time to develop. The universe is so wanting and ready to give us what we need. And it will also give us what we want and ask for, if it is in our purpose of our being here, if it doesn't take us astray for whatever it is. And astray is another one of those words. It's like there's no astray, so to speak, the right path, but we come here with an intent.
Yes, I
Things
agree
to
with
do.
you.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so let's substitute that word.
Yeah.
And as long as that works within your soul's intent, the universe is happy to give. But sometimes it takes a while. Is my intent strong enough? Is it really, or is it the right time? It's
Right.
like we've noted on our board, Claudia wants this, but it's not time for her to be driving a Ferrari or whatever. She'll just wreck it, whatever it is. So, be fervent in your ask. Be, if that's your intention, then continue to read books or continue to listen to these programs and stuff. And I've probably taken us way off a trail that you
No,
wanted.
we were on exactly the trail because I wanted to know how you developed your intuition, and you
Yeah.
clearly shared the story about your guide. So, what do you think are some of the most important lessons that your guide has imparted to you that you've learned since you've had your near death
Oh
experience?
man. Oh, that's wow. Okay. One of them is building the foundation. So just as we were just talking, it's like we all have these questions of, why am I here? What is my purpose? What is the meaning of the world and all the people in it? And, is there life after death? All the big questions. And it's like, we'd really like the answer to those. But what I learned, and I think I mentioned in spirit school, he'll come up and say, come with me, or now he'll put out his hand or something. And I'm off into, I call it, an in between in a classroom with the most patient, loving teachers, because I hated school when I was a kid. I got through it, but I didn't love it. And now I love it. I'm like, can I go to spirit school again? And because I get this lesson. And so, one of the most important ones is, we'd love to give you the answers, but it's like you have no foundation to understand. We're not, humans are not stupid or anything, but it takes, your head would explode of the enormity of what the other side is. And I don't claim to know all the answers, but I'm sure as heck looking for them and excited for every one of them that I get. It's like, oh my God, that's so cool. I've never, you look at the universe, the stars above us, and go, oh, they're so pretty. Well, there's definitely reasons that they're up there. It's not just a romantic background, or whatnot, or for pretty, and I want to know all of that. And so I continue to ask. So the foundation is really, really important. And one of the spirit schools that I went to, was about building this foundation. And they said, describe, okay, I grew up, I born in the mid 50s, and I grew up with a certain type of, well, in my neighborhood, decorating in the living room type thing. And there was a pillow, and a lot of different houses had this pillow. It's really an ugly pillow, but my girlfriend, her mother had it on the couch, and it was this translucent brown pillow, and it had little pink velvet dots on it. And he handed me in this place of the in between at spirit school, he handed me this pillow and he said, describe this pillow. And I was like, well, it's brown, it's got little, and he was like, no, what if I didn't know color? Explain without using those type of terms. Brown, I don't know what brown means. What are dots? What are, and it was really hard, when you're trying to, and I said something like, after being kind of rejected, everything that I said, it was like, well, like an onion, that at the top of the onion, there, or the outside of the onion, there's that translucent, that color, that's the kind of brown that this pillow is. And he was accepting some of that, but what he was trying to show me is how hard it is to lay on, this huge explanation of the other side with words that we can't grasp. It's that communication is really hard. One of them is building the foundation. So just as we were just talking, it's like we all have these questions of, why am I here? What is my purpose? What is the meaning of the world and all the people in it? And, is there life after death? All the big questions. And it's like, we'd really like the answer to those. But what I learned, and I think I mentioned in spirit school, he'll come up and say, come with me, or now he'll put out his hand or something. And I'm off into, I call it, an in-between in a classroom with the most patient, loving teachers, because I hated school when I was a kid. I got through it, but I didn't love it. And now I love it. I'm like, can I go to spirit school again? And because I get this lesson. And so, one of the most important ones is, we'd love to give you the answers, but it's like, you have no foundation to understand. Humans are not stupid or anything, but it takes, your head would explode of the enormity of what the other side is. And I don't claim to know all the answers, but I'm sure as heck looking for them and excited for every one of them that I get. It's like, oh my God, that's so cool. I've never, you look at the universe, the stars above us, and go, oh, they're so pretty. Well, there's definitely reasons that they're up there. It's not just a romantic background, or whatnot, or for pretty, and I want to know all of that. And so I continue to ask. So the foundation is really, really important. And one of the spirit schools that I went to was about building this foundation. And they said, describe, okay, I grew up, I born in the mid 50s, and I grew up with a certain type of, well, in my neighborhood, decorating in the living room type thing. And there was a pillow, and a lot of different houses had this pillow. It's really an ugly pillow, but my girlfriend, her mother had it on the couch, and it was this translucent brown pillow, and it had little pink velvet dots on it. And he handed me in this place of the in between at spirit school, he handed me this pillow and he said, describe this pillow. And I was like, well, it's brown, it's got little, and he was like, no, what if I didn't know color? Explain without using those type of terms. Brown, I don't know what brown means. What are dots? What are, and it was really hard, when you're trying to, and I said something like, after being kind of rejected, everything that I said, it was like, well, like an onion, that at the top of the onion, there, or the outside of the onion, there's that translucent, that color, that's the kind of brown that this pillow is. And he was accepting some of that, but what he was trying to show me is how hard it is to lay on, this huge explanation of the other side with words that we can't grasp. It's that communication is really hard. So I've been getting, bits and pieces. So that is one thing, is that how important it is for us to build that foundation, and how hard it is for them to just throw an answer out to us. God, I have so many of them. One that solidified my my understanding of God. And because when you hear things like, well, we're all God, and it's kind of like, the first time I heard that, I'm like, what? I'm God? It just was so different to me. But through these classes, and then I was given this visual, and hang with me here because it's weird, but it was this beautiful coin purse. It was this pretty pink color, and it had little sewn in pearls and jewels, and it was sewn with this golden thread, and it was just as pretty as it could be, a little girly thing, but what, it's not important, but I just wanted to, of how magnificent looking this little coin purse was. And it started ripping off pieces of itself. And some of the pieces had a piece of pearl, or some of them drug a piece of golden thread, or some of them were just a jagged little tiny piece of fabric. But here were all these ripped up pieces from this beautiful whole. And they started to vibrate and shake. And they were being given uniqueness and their own life. And they all just kind of vibrated off into different directions. Every one of them looked different because it had just been kind of a ripped piece. And I was able to see our own uniqueness. We are of God, but we're all individual. We're all special. We all make up the whole. For that purse to become whole, we all have to find our way back to it. So that was a huge one. So I offer to the audience that I've been told no one is to be left behind. And we think about this world of being, just in such chaos and whatnot. And it's like, we found a way of kind of stymieing some of that fear or chaos or whatnot. We know that there's more, and there are people looking for that moreness out there. But I know I stepped off that cliff, but
No, you didn't. You were exactly what I asked for. I wanted to know what you had learned in spirit school, and you shared three wonderful concepts: the foundation, the ability to understand how we can't necessarily explain these concepts, and we can't understand sometimes what we seek because the concepts are beyond our understanding. And then also the fact that we're all individual pieces of the whole, and we all have I think they were
Oh, thank you.
beautifully conveyed. I love that.
Well, the separateness that we're feeling right now, we're here in separateness on purpose. It's
Yes,
so
I agree.
we went through that veil of forgetting, or we
Yes.
never put up with the crap we put up with. It's like, there's no way that we'll come down. We may volunteer on the other side to come and be a starving child or a beaten wife or something, because and that has 10 different trails I could go down. We choose those circumstances for a reason. But if we didn't forget how magnificent we are on the other side and who we are, there's no way. It'd be like, take me home. I'm hungry. This is baloney. So to make this experience real, we had to forget how we are one. And so one of the concepts that I just wanted to finish was, we're all part of that whole. We're all part of that beautiful coin purse, and we're all looking for a way to get back to that. It's a draw. It's a draw to get back to it. And that purse will never be whole until all of our neighbors and everybody. So you and I can seek and know and, feel really great. But if we don't share it and bring our neighbors and whatnot, and I don't mean that it's up to us to teach or anything else, because we're all on our own path. So I don't mean follow me because I have all the answers. But if someone is seeking, I want to be able to share that, to help my fellow brother, sister out there, because I've been told it's like no one is to be left behind. So
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, speaking of sharing what you've
mm,
learned, you've written 3 books or 4?
I'm on my fourth, but 3
You're on
published.
your 4th. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the books that you've written?
Okay, well, the first one is called Gifts from the Edge, and it is some of the dreams and my experiences in spirit school. It was kind of dipping my toe in the water, so to speak, because there's a point where everything about you has changed, but you still smile and act normal in a crowd or whatever, and it's like, oh, great. What if I go to a family reunion and they're like, Claudia is out there. So she's joined woo woo land. And there is a point where it's like, do I be who I am and share what I know, or do I just stand in the crowd and hide, and there's a point where you just can't do that anymore. You have to just, so that was my book of starting to share, not trying to be totally out there. And I'm not new age stuff. I don't That's, again, our language is so limited, and my use of it is limited too.
Well, I like the term standing in your truth because it
Yeah,
seems
there
like
you
that's
go.
what you've done. You're standing in
Yeah.
your truth.
So the second book is Lessons from the Edge, because it's so much of that, but I also wrote a synopsis. I hadn't written about my NDE. I still wasn't ready to share my NDE, my darkness. I wasn't ready for, it's like I can be ridiculed by a lot of other things, but my personal sacred darkness was mine. And I didn't even put it, I alluded to it, but I never shared it. So I shared everything in my second book. And I wrote a synopsis of what I had learned um, because of my near-death experience. And that has been reposted and whatnot. That's the 10 things I learned when I died has been out there quite a bit. And that's, I speak about that too. In fact, I'll be in Lilydale in New York. If anyone's heard of it, come and visit me this summer. In
Do you know what month you're going to be there?
July the 12th, I think, is when it
By the
starts.
time
It's
of
like a 3 day.
2024, because these
Yes.
videos live
There
in
we go.
perpetuity.
Yeah.
It could be many years from now when
Yeah.
somebody's
But
listening.
a 3 day retreat and all kinds of fun things. And I'm going to be the speaker there, and it's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to
Wonderful.
that. So that is the second book. And then the third book, when I was going through my dark period, my walking through the desert period, I guess is better termed, looking, and everybody that when I'd read a beautiful story or whatever, I'd copy it and put it in a file, and I'd want to meet those people. Like I was saying earlier, it's like I want to know what they know. I want to sit at lunch and just talk about it, and be in that space where they're at. It was, most of it was before the internet, or or at least my proficiency in the internet, whatever I just said, you got it. um you know eh, so I went through these stories, and I contacted a lot of people, and people that I already had met through ions and whatnot, and I put a book together called We Touched Heaven, and it's done very well. It was a #1 new release on Amazon a few years ago, and
Congratulations.
it is a compilation of 47 different either near-death experiences or spontaneous awakenings. And I would love more of your story. That sounds like something that would be perfect. But I aimed it all over the world. I have, Buddhism and Asia, Africa, Canada, England. I'm trying to think. It's just everywhere with all different types of people, a marine biologist, a mortician, a scientist, a teacher, a real estate agent. You know, I even had a story in there of a hunter trying to explain when he and the soul of the animal that he was hunting actually switched places. And
That
he,
almost sounds like a life review where
oh
you
my goodness.
experience from other people
Yeah.
what you know, were on the other side of delving or giving out.
Yeah. So it was like, oh, you know, just some of those experiences. So there's 47 different stories in that book. We Touched Heaven. I'm super proud of it. I'm super proud of it and
You should
thankful to
be.
everybody who contributed. You know, that's doctors. I had MD and I had psychologists and yeah, all kinds of
So
different.
what is your book that you're working on right now?
Right now is the hardest concept that I had to accept, not because I didn't want to accept it, I just didn't understand it. When I started going through, because I'd be in my car sometimes, I'd talk about what I understood of the other side. And I'd ask questions. I'd be like, okay, I kind of get this, blah, blah, blah. But what about this? Talking to my invisible spirit guide. And one of the concepts that I didn't understand was reincarnation. You know, I'd been taught, hey, you know, we're in this time and we better do good. We come in as sinners and then we better get perfect before we die so that we can be let back in. And it's like that concept just did not fly with me. But it was like, well, I in my own head I made up. In fact, I even kind of ask in a church sitting and whatnot because I was a question asker, and it's kind of like they'd be like, just have faith or it'll all get worked out in the end. And I'm like, well, I want it worked out now. I want the answers now. And so what I came up with is, well, unless your life is ended really, really early, or you know, you weren't finished, maybe you get that chance to come back. Because I was told, you know, it's like if you come back, you could have been good enough or whatever to get back in, but if you come back and you're bad, then you know you blew that chance or whatever. You had this one chance. So it's kind of like, well, you know, I think I've been good enough to get in. So I don't know if I want to come back. And I knew that it was a screwed up concept. And so I have really, really worked on an ask about reincarnation.
I love that. I actually interviewed a man, I'll put the link up here, who worked with a man who had studied children who remembered lives
Mm,
before they came into this incarnation. They were young children and they were able to find really evidential information and proof that
hmm.
what these children were saying, like their name, where they lived. They would take them to the town and the kid would get out of the car and run to their old house. They would see
Wow.
people on the street and say, oh, that's so and so. And
Yeah.
it's incredible. So there's a lot of evidential information. I would really love to have you come back on the show to talk about that in a little bit more
Okay.
detail, because I do know from comments and from people that I talk to that this is still an area that a lot of people grapple with, and they don't understand it. They don't, it's so foreign to what
Hmm.
they've been taught that sometimes it's really hard for them to understand how that could be real or
Right.
how it works. I would love to
I
do that. Would you come back?
I would love to. I'll just give a little tease of it. So I'm
Okay, yes.
just finishing, just doing the editing and whatnot. But we talked about my dad, my love for my dad, and I had written these books before. Well, I had a dream. I saw myself laying in my bed. I was looking at my own self in my dream, and who was next to me at my bedside was my dad. And he pulled a sack from my bedstand, and it had two books in it. And my immediate thought of the person who's watching this, right? I'm just viewing this happening is, oh, my dad's interested in books. I need to go run and get my books and show him. But then I thought, well, wait a minute. I'm sure he already knows about those. And I looked closer at the books he was holding, and they were fiction. I've never written fiction, but I have been led, pushed, dreamed to write this book, and there's another one coming because there were two. So it's a series that is talking about reincarnation based on what my guide has taken me through in spirit school and an amazing experience that my father taught me, my bestest teacher, the person I trust with this information. And so I want to mention as we close, so that probably won't be here till spring, but so far the title is Dreams Beyond the Edge. All my books have an edge in it. That's my last name. And if you have questions or whatever that you'd like to contact me, I'm at claudiaedge.com, and I love that. So I don't mind speaking about that.
Well, you've shared so much. I'm so grateful for my time with you. I always learn so much. These conversations feed my soul. So just thank you so much for your time. Thank you for writing these books to share with everybody, because not everybody likes to consume things in the same way. And it gives them even more detail. Like, this is great because you get like this little abridged version, and then the books are always so much more detailed. So I'm glad that you have resources out there for everybody to pick up. So thank you.
You bet. It was really nice to meet you, and I've had a really good time. And thank you, audience. Appreciate your time. Keep seeking.
Keep seeking. I love that. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Bye-bye.
Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.